Hello, welcome. Another session. Exciting. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining me from. Another exciting session today. If I can just get some thumbs up in the chat just to make sure the technology is working, that you can hear me okay. Um, it all looks fine. I'm just checking things, making sure we're okay. So today is the third chapter of the book, part four of the book. And it's exciting because this covers a great deal of information, 196 different situations that leaders and coaches need to be aware of and what to do in those situations. Volume two will be coming out later this year, so do prepare for that, and we'll get into some of the information that's in the book. And as I said, if you haven't been following all of the webinars, they're all about the content of the book, and volume two will dive into that even further. So we wanted to give you something in your hand first as a handbook before we dive into a more of a journey. So, if you've been following what I've been talking about in the book, it's in 4 stages. And they are really the 4 stages of building a successful business that is built around people, systems, and the right culture, the right behavior, and so forth. So the journey is first self-awareness. And that's why AccuMatch is so important. AccuMatch is our behavior map, and we use it with individuals or with teams, depending on what we are working on, whether it's a one-on-one coaching or group coaching or a culture. The AccuMatch allows us to do that. For the book launch, we have taken the first part of the book, which is the self-awareness, and created the Leadership Intelligence Self-Assessment, LISA, which you can find at biqorg.com/Lisa. It's as hard as that. Okay. Part 2 is really your ability to observe other people's behavior. So once you become self-aware, you're able to then observe that behavior in other people. Then you go into stage 3, which is then adapting and adopting a new style of engaging with people to achieve the outcomes that you're looking to achieve. And finally, what we're doing, this group of 9 webinars, 9 workshops, is really looking at the mechanisms for empowering people, and it comes down to technology, processes, environment. I go back a few decades, if you like, a couple of the businesses that I started early in my career as a youth. The first things I did was document the procedure. In fact, in our import and distribution business, the warehouse, as an example, had a flowchart on the wall where most of the work was being done from the order through to shipping. Okay, and the floor flowed the same way as the process, so it was easy, and hence I came up with the plot, PLOT. If you know me, you know that I love acronyms. Take systems, put them to acronyms so people can remember them. And it's process, location, organization, and technology. Okay, that's what PLOT stands for. So what's the process? Have you considered the location, the organization of the org chart, if you like, and the technology that is going to be used? Every desk actually in that space, in that business, had posted stickers, because this was before all the automation that we have today, all the tools that we have today. And so we had posted stickers on their process. So anytime an order came in, that person knew exactly what to do. The salespeople knew what to do with the CRM, with follow-ups. Every desk had a process. The only desk that didn't have one was the creative team, because we wanted them to think outside the box, to draw outside the 9 dots, if you understand that metaphor. So this is really critical for the success of the team, but it's also about the impact on the behavior. So we get back to behavior intelligence and why this is critical. Let me get my clicker working right. So the problems that we see are really not always people problems. They are often system problems, okay? And you've heard me talk about this many times, although Acumatch was born from the need to help people understand themselves, each other, and so forth. So it was more about the people dynamics. But the systems were critical. So what happened usually with a lot of the companies that we coached, they were constantly hiring, firing, blaming people, using all of the wrong language, because they believed that they needed to hire people who knew what to do. Okay, and good luck with that, because if they knew what to do, they were probably running your competitor business, right? So you need to understand that people join your organization in order for them to be given the tools and the systems and the support to be successful in your organization the way you want to do business, so that they can be assimilated, if you like, in your environment. Okay. So a bad system will always beat good people, right? Okay, so you can have the best people in the world, hire the best people, but if your systems are not supporting them well, they're not going to stay for at least that. It should be clear to you. So people perform to the level that the system allows them, and I can tell you lots of stories throughout the decades of the journeys that I've been on. And I'll touch on some of those throughout here. So today, the 6 principles that I want to share are really, the systems create the conditions. The default will always come down to the common denominator being the system, right? The information flow is important to make sure that people are well informed to make decisions, because we still have an 80-20 rule. 80% of things are procedural, systemized. 20% is really what you're paying people to think, right? So 80-20 rule. Physical versus digital environment. I talked about plots. Important to remember that. And then we'll talk about workflows. So let me dive into these principles one at a time. Start with the first one. Systems create the conditions for behavior. What does that mean? Well, let's look at an example. A company had high turnover. 40% is conservative. I've seen companies with a much higher turnover. And the immediate thing is the leaders always blame HR, recruiting, poor hiring, poor pool of people, 3 Ps. Okay. So the exit interview showed lack of growth, but nothing changed. Nothing was happening to do that. The onboarding lasted 2 days, but there was no formal mentorship after that. People retain very little information after that training happened. So the promotion guidelines weren't there, the performance measurements weren't there. So people left, they didn't stay, right? People worked within those constraints, the growth path didn't exist. And so the ambitious people, the successful ones, did not stay. We experienced some of those same things, by the way, right? If the channels are broken, you get silos, you get all of these things. So before you start blaming people and looking at the people fix, why not ask this one question first? What systems makes this behavior likely? What's the tools, the processes, the measurements, the incentives? What information is creating that behavior in your organization, the outcome that you're experiencing? What does the system make easy? What does it make hard? Okay. What behaviors does it reward by default? And so on. So, we've had lots of similar situations throughout our career that really showed us the importance of this. In fact, every organization I work with, the first thing I talk to them about is, do you know your process? If you don't, we need to start there, right? So another example, so principle number 2 is default settings drive the decision. So what does that mean? It means, here's an example. Finance complain constantly about late expense submissions. I remember in my early career as a manager at IBM, trying to get people to submit their daily reports, their documents, their worksheet, if you like. It was a 60-40, very similar to what we see on this chart. And it was difficult to get those people that were in that 40% and non-compliant to shift to that. And the reason being was there was a lot of duplication in many different areas. It was a manual process. You had to write it out. You had to bring it in. You had to file it. You had to then type it. There was all kinds of hurdles that were in the way. And what we realized was people, they were already calling in after each job to do a update with the call center. And so the information was already being captured at that point. And all we had to do was really tweak that and eliminate that whole process. And then all they had to do was just review it and sign off on it. Okay. So it was the system that was getting in the way, not the people. Everybody had good intentions. They all wanted to be supportive and so forth. And the other side of it was, the management, was just collecting the data for the wrong reasons, measuring volume instead of quality. So, and we see that in a lot of support environments, where tech support, sales support, all of those support areas, sometimes they focus on quick fixes rather than first-time fixes. And first-time fixes are quality fixes that mean the client isn't going to be frustrated having to call back, get back in the queue, waste a lot of time, etc. It's very frustrating when you don't get that problem resolved first time. Okay, so another system that really needs to be looked at. So the defaults are often silent. And, in today's world, we don't have really, I can't even get stickies on my screens here because the rim is so fine, there's nowhere to put stickies on there, right? So we're relying on an invisible process. And so it's important to train people on what that process is going to look like. What are the stages that they will experience through using the system, because it's invisible. They don't know, they can't see what the next screen is going to look like until they finish the first screen, right? So those things are really critical to just make sure that you take the time to map the path, right? Just choose one process which has low compliance, walk through, follow some users around, and document it or record it, whatever you need to do. We see a lot of sessions, when people are doing sales calls on Zoom, etc. And with AI now, we have the ability to also summarize that without having to actually rewatch what they did, what they talked about, what they cover. And you could even make it such that the AI can check it against a checklist that you have, and we can build all of that for you so that, all the team has to do is really do their job, focus on being present with the client instead of being distracted by a checklist that they need to follow and things like that. So you can actually even prompt that on the screen. Okay. So look at ways to make things easier. We do this with clients, any revisiting client prospects, or when we send out emails, we pre-populate the forms so that they don't have to retype their name and all of that. We already have that information. And so the same can happen within your CRM, within your platform. Look at ways to minimize the amount of stuff, just like I was mentioning with our team at IBM, that was really blocking them from being productive, and they resented the old system, basically. Okay. Principle number 3, information flow shapes the action. What does that mean? This is an example of silos in sales that resulted in duplicated effort. Okay, so the same prospects were being contacted by multiple people. There was competition over, oh, that's mine, and so forth. It created animosity instead of collaboration, competition instead of collaboration. So the invisibility, you only get to see your stuff. Well, your stuff could be duplicated, duplicating somebody else's stuff. And when we were a national distribution company with salespeople all over the country, the challenge that we had was someone would have a friend of a friend that was in somebody else's territory, and we get into, this is mine, or it's my referral, etc. And when we realized that that was happening, the solution was to create collaboration. Okay, make it visible to everybody so that they could see that those relationships, and they could talk to each other and actually work together to close that and share the commissions and things like that. So it allowed them to actually be excited to share those opportunities with other people so that they could all benefit together. And it achieved bonuses and all kinds of things that were then a result of that great collaboration that happened. So there are many situations. I'm sure you have your own situations. I'm just giving you some examples based on my own experience, having run multiple businesses throughout my career. So the information architecture becomes the critical part in this. So if you want to create silos, yes, hide information. If you want to create collaboration, then make sure it's visible so that people could actually step up and co-create. We've talked about that in previous sessions. When people co-create a solution, they own it, right? So map the information flow, identify who's hoarding and why it's happening, and help them build the solution, the system solution, to allow that to succeed properly. So who has information that other people need? These are questions you can ask. What decisions are being made because of incomplete data? And where is it duplicated? You can read those and you can work through those. Okay. So that's number 3. 4, environments cue the behavior. All right. So what does that mean? Example is the open office disaster. So a company moved to open floor plan to improve collaboration. It was really often because the leaders wanted to have their finger on everything that was going on. They wanted to, be able to see that and walk around and hear what's going on to correct things, etc. Nice, but it has some impact if you don't apply it in the right context. Okay, so going back to plot, people, location, organization, and technology. You got to look at the location that the people are working in, but look at the organization from an org chart, looking at the roles that different people have. Okay, and so instead of what's a good role? A good example, when I was running a software company, and the department for the software development team was an open floor plan, and that works really well. Why? Because developers are busy on the keyboard; they're not on the phone talking to people. In the sales office, everybody had an office. Okay, the only space in the middle was really for the photocopier and different equipment that they needed, and maybe the admin people to support them. Okay, why? Because of exactly what we see on the screen. When you've got salespeople on the phone, some people are loud, some people are soft, some people want to build a relationship. You're really stifling their ability to operate within that environment. If they wanted to discuss client situations, it was hard to do in an open floor plan. There was no quiet space to do that. Open doors meant lots of interruptions. As a manager, there was lots of situations where you really needed quiet and you needed to close the door in order to get shit done, right? Okay, and you can't do that. So think about the location as well as the technology. Okay, so location will also govern the behavior that happens in your company, the culture, right? And so on. So even the water cooler area is important for you to think about what happens in that space as well, right? So design it properly, create, if you're going to have open floor plan, make sure you consider the roles that are affected by that, and so on. Principle number 5, workflow determine possibility. Right, so this again think of IBM when this happens. This was really a great example of the engineers in the field seeing great opportunities, great ideas, coming up with amazing stuff that could change the course of the company. And they would submit that, and it would take months, sometimes even more than the 8 months that was on the screen. And the reason being is there was an approval process that it went through, and by the time it got approved, often it was already, the first person talked to somebody and they launched it and they did it, and nobody got to find out about it, and people weren't being rewarded for their ideas. And it was a complex workflow, and it was based on a lot of hidden information. Okay, and so what the shift was needed to allow everybody in that process to work at the same time, get through it quickly, and also transparency. So making available I think we see it a lot these days, in not the change logs, but the upcoming features where people can vote on them and things like that. So that creates a visibility so that people can search for ideas that may be similar to theirs, and maybe they don't need to submit, and they can just support that and complement that idea, rather than be left in the dark and then getting a message 12 months after they put their idea in saying, oh yeah, we already had that one and it's already implemented. Sorry, good luck, keep it up, do put forward some more ideas. What do you think that does to people? It doesn't help, right? Okay, so the process and the system really is the catalyst for the behavior that ended up from, instead of being very exciting to put forward some ideas, it was, I'll just keep it to myself. They're just going to take my idea and implement it. All kinds of negativity that came out of that we then were able to correct and eliminate. Okay, so workflow simplification questions that you can ask. So each one of these has some questions you can use. How many approvals are required? ISO 9000 is great, but be careful that it's not just all sequential, right? Okay, all the approval processes. There's a lot of things that are being put in place that sometimes we need to just apply some common sense to them, and they're designed for with good intention, but when they are applied without the consideration of how it impacts your business, you are missing some huge opportunities to get it right. Last but not least, system redesign beats individual intervention. So what does that talk about? This is really addressing the training treadmill, if you like. A lot of companies invest a lot in workshops and training and educating people, and it's a great spike. They're all excited and thankful at the beginning, but it's temporary and everything goes back to the way it was. Why? Okay, is it the people or is it the systems? It's the systems. And we see there are tools out there today that actually look at that. I came across one, I think last year, that monitors the progress and the psychological behavior that happens after training, and it has numerous checkpoints to engage that. That's one tool that you can think about and engage. But the other ways are really to think about the mentoring process, the follow through, the technology, but maybe it's change the system first before you send people to training. So if you are going to send them to be trained on a particular area, what's the reason for the training? What's the outcome that you want to have happen? How would you observe that? Back to the observation, how would you observe that that's being applied in your workplace? And start there, right? Work backwards from the end point that you want to achieve. That's the whole reason. You don't send people for training just for the hell of it. You send them because you want to improve something, or you want them to come back and apply that knowledge. Well, maybe you need to look at it with the applying it first before the training. So put the systems in place to track those, put the checkpoints that continuously remind them, maybe some quizzes that check their retention. That's the psychology side of things, of how they're using it, and the measurements and systems come first before the training. Okay, what system elements will determine or undermine this learning? Okay, and so you need to think about that. So it's the workflow. What's the workflow that's going to support the new behavior, right? We're doing a lot of software development for a lot of companies in order to improve their business intelligence side of things from the technology. And really, as I discussed last week, the problem often is not the system, it's the implementation and the adoption of that information technology in the workplace. So people need to adapt, they need to be mentored, they need to be followed up on. You can't just teach them once and forget it, because they'll just go back to the way they used to do it, because it's the least resistance path, right? The path of the least resistance will always take precedence over learning something new, unless you are really embracing it through the follow-ups, through the technology, the workflow, and all the support that needs to happen. So the 6 things I just covered today. Excited to talk some more next week. It's a 9-week part of the book today. So the week 3 summary. So stop blaming people, audit the systems. Simple, right? Redesign the default to make compliance easy. Don't remove those blocks that are in the system. They're making it hard. Transparency. Make stuff available to people. Okay. Don't be afraid of sharing stuff. It's important to do that. Align the physical environment to the digital, right? Make sure that those two are working together. Simplify the workflow and systems before training. All right. So your action item this week, right? Identify one problem, work on it. Okay, map the system, follow some people around, take track or use AI to do that. If you have that ability, we can help you with that. Next week, chapter 4 from part 4 is removing the friction to reinforce the flow. So I hope you will join me next week. If you have any questions, I'll be online. The team will be online to look at your questions and help you with those. So without further ado, thank you for joining. Do remember, Lisa is online, biqorg.com/Lisa. On the screen, you've got /events. So if you want to catch some of those earlier sessions, you can catch them on the events page. All right. Thank you again. And I hope you've enjoyed today. I know I have. See you next week.